Salem is a town with two interesting stories to tell. One, of course, is the ever famous Salem witch trials and their long history of witchcraft in that town. And the second is the Salem Maritime history. And Salem is also the home of the Salem Maritime Museum. And across the street from that is the Customs House, equally interesting. These are the docks that you see when you visit Salem. They're right across the street from the Customs House. There's a place here for, at the time, probably 3 or 4 ships. This is a ship that the National Park Service is restoring called the Friendship of Salem. It was launched in 1797. It's a Dutch East Indiaman. It was made 15 voyages during its time on the sea to places like the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia today, India, China, South America, Caribbean islands, England, Germany, Mediterranean, and Russia. During the War of 1812, she was captured as a prize of war by the British sloop of war Rosamond in September of 1812. What you see here is a faithful replica of the original ship built by the National Park Service. As you wander around the top deck, you'll see some interesting sights. Like there's the wheel and the capstan, which actually led down to the rudder. They're working on, of course, the outside of it here, at the top of it. You see all kinds of ropes strewn about. And some equipment that they're using to restore the ship. And we'll head downstairs now.
So this space, it's called the tween deck, because between decks. And it serves as a living space for your crew during your trip, as well as pretty much storage for whatever they need, including things like their food, their water, and so forth. Below here is the cargo hold.
Okay.
Now when that gets too full, if it gets too full, they start storing things up here as well.
Wow. So this is where they slept?
Yep. Between shifts.
Between shifts.
Everyone has a 4-hour shift.
Okay.
What you want to do with the rest of your time, that's all up to you. Most people bring along with them something.
This is the captain's quarters.
Here you go, Mom.
Aha! That's pretty nifty. Move it back up.
So much work.
Is this crew only beyond this point?
After we toured the ship, we made our way across the street to the Customs House. Right after the Revolutionary War ended, one of the first pieces of legislation that the first United States Congress passed was the Tariff Act, which was signed on July 4th, 1789. This act authorized the collection of tariff duties, or customs, on imported goods. Tariffs were popular with the first U.S. Congress because they were easy to collect, reliable, unobtrusive, and able to bring in enough money to operate the government at the time. Tariffs were the source of 95% of all federal revenue up to 1860, right before the Civil War. The first federal budget was close to $4.6 million. The population in the 1790 census was around 4 million people. So quick math, you see everybody's tax burden, it's around at the time to be about $1.50 per person per year. In 1790, a tradesman earned around 25 cents a day or so. So this tax burden can be paid off in 5 or 6 days' work. Or you could just buy domestic products and pay no tariffs at all. So 5 or 6 days' work compared to, what is it today, April 30th, that everybody pays off their tax burden? A little different back then. So tariffs were an important source of revenue, though, and since we didn't have much of a federal government at the time, they were more than capable paying off most of the federal debt. That's why places like this were important. You see the customs houses right across the street from the docks. It was basically our, IRS for the time. A ship pulled up, had everything weighed. Customs officials put a tariff, and then you walked across the street and paid it. In places like this. This is a monument to Richard Moore, one of the founding fathers of Salem. Mr. Moore had a son who was actually accused of witchcraft. He escaped trial by basically getting out of town and heading to New York. Our next stop was the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. The Salem witch trials only lasted a couple of years, from 1692 to 1693, but they seem to have resonated with our society ever since. Today, the Salem Witch Museum, which is the most visited tourist attraction in Salem. We chose to bypass the museum and visit the old graveyards instead. Here are some of the actual gravestones. Amongst these are people who were convicted of being witches and put on trial and killed. 19 people were hanged, and one person was what they call pressed to death during the trials. After visiting the gravesites, we decided to get something to eat. We found this nice little restaurant called Longboards.
Like pineapple vodka on the rocks. Oh, it's empty. Mine was delicious. Jim's still eating his popcorn. What type of pizza was it, Jim?
Sausage and onion?
Is it good?
Sausage and pepper.
Sausage and pepper.
Sausage and pepper, maybe. It's good. Fantastic.
Yeah,
After we finished Salem, we decided to head up the road to the Saugus Ironworks, a National Historic Site. It happened to be a Tuesday, and wouldn't you know it, they're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, which we didn't realize because we didn't really do too much advanced planning. This was kind of an off-the-cuff visit, but it seems like an extremely interesting place. It's the birthplace of American iron industry, so they claim. There was a bunch of buildings here as you first entered, but we had no idea what they were. This was a map of the ironworks, and of course the buildings we saw near the entrance aren't on the map. There was this walkway. You could walk out the back past the buildings and go see this. There was like an observation bridge, I guess you would call it. And we took a look out there to see what was there. Looks like there's a well or maybe a vent of some sort. We have no idea. But you could look down the river where the water flowed, which powered this area. This was the pre-steam era, so water wheels and water power seemed to provide the energy to power all these equipment. My son kind of summed up everyone's feelings here in the next clip.
I would like to come back here. Just think they have a working water wheel and everything. When it's actually open, it'd be really interesting.
After we left the Saugus Iron Works, we headed to Lowell, Massachusetts.
Yeah, you could.
This millworker's experience seems to sum it up. He talks about how after he got his job, he went to the supper table, but he couldn't hear a thing that the family was talking about during supper. I'm going to leave the audio on from the actual mill that we recorded. It's kind of neat. It kind of has a rhythm to it. And you have to remember that there's only, I'd say, 3 or 4 of the machines running the day we were there. So you can imagine what it would be like if there was a bunch of them going.
nice hollow. This is an early one that you had to hand crank. A lash and loom.
We think this is a model of a typical mill. Starting at the top, there's all kinds of...
This mill. First they had to do the picking. The process was picking, carding, drawing, weaving, spinning, dressing, wrapping and donning in, the weaving, the finishing, and then the baling. Here is their actual examples of their clothing. They're fancies. They also had their casual, extra heavy for men. I'm pretty sure the flowers were not for men. These are the men clothing. Many of the mills closed or reduced operations during the Civil War.
Lowell turned out to be a very interesting stop. We all enjoyed it. It was kind of a loud place to be, but it was kind of neat seeing how they laid out the town just for manufacturing, and then seeing all the machines that were still running. It was quite interesting. Anyway, thanks for watching. From No Worries RVing, please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you.